Hello, good evening, and welcome to the Sunday night breakdown. Daniel Ratledge and Dave Forrester with you to go back over all of the action in the British Basketball League this week. And Dave, when we did our extensive planning and research that ran to at least 4 or 5 messages back and forth, this was probably what we thought Sunday night breakdown was going to be. A week of games well spaced. You could watch them all live, perfect, not too much, didn't have to chase everything up and all of that sort of stuff.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It was a stunning week of scheduling,
and let's hope we'll get some more of them again in the next 3 years. We sort of debated about how much we would cover the Lions in Europe, given they're playing so many games. But we've got to do it certainly at the beginning, and I don't think this game will take too long given the way it was played out. But let's go back to Tuesday night and Hapoel Tel Aviv 76, London Lions 59 in Lions EuroCup debut. They were 9-0 down. They were 12-1 down, and that was basically the game. And to compound things, Sam Decker, who had the first 5 points for the Lions, rolled his ankle as he landed on the last of his scores and was not to be seen again.
Yeah, didn't even need a dodgy stream for it either, did we?
No, available on Lions YouTube and BT Sport going forward.
I think I like to put that down to the siren call that we made.
Well, I would have thought so, yeah.
You know, and I like that kind of stung people into action in the corridors of basketball power and EuroLeague TV and all that type of stuff. But maybe not. But anyway, it does kind of do away with any excuse not to watch it. The game itself was as you describe. What kind of the bigger stuff I was taking from it was what will London be taking from it, if you know what I mean. They've built a team which has primarily recruited its higher level talent at the forward positions.
Yeah.
You know, with the ability to play Decker as a 3, Ovi Soko as a 4, Kufos and Sharma at the 5, Zubcic coming off the bench, Ruban again playing at the 3. So that's a lot of talent and also a lot of resources that have gone into those positions.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, what happened, and obviously losing Tariq Phillip and Aaron Best not playing as well, meant that effectively when Decker went down, they were playing with 3 imports well, 4 imports, but not much. Sorry, 3 imports when Decker went down because Best wasn't playing. And it kind of showed how when they came up against a high-level EuroCup team who were basically, spent most of their money that I could see on guards.
Yep.
And 3s are more than 2s.
Yep.
And the guard, and even to get the 2s, the guards have to get the ball to where the bigs want it.
Yeah.
And when you can't throw the ball at the Decker, and let's be honest, they couldn't make it. They weren't in any rhythm in the first few minutes until Decker got them going with his talent, and then he got hurt the moment he kind of started going there. Then I thought that it kind of cast a pall over precisely how they've recruited that team for Europe.
Yeah.
Losing Tariq Phillip was enormous because he was a guard who was at that. He was certainly, competitive at that level, and he has a British passport, and they've got to have 7 British passport players on their team.
Yeah.
That's at the moment. Now, what they do have is the opportunity to, to go and recruit a EuroLeague guard if they want, and just play him in EuroLeague like they did last year with Teague.
Yeah.
And Majauskas. But I'm guessing that they've probably had a year of that and decided that's not a particularly good idea.
No. It might be slightly easier when you're playing every week, but it's not helpful. It's not helpful.
Indeed. Well, that's a valued decision that the GM and the coach have to make. But what this game showed, I thought, was that when Decker went down, basically, the guy who played for him was Quealy. Quealy's very inexperienced. He's 21. If you look at his resume, he's been in good programs, but he's played 6, 7, 8 minutes a game. I think on Real GM, which I use a lot to look at numbers, I went on it this morning. He's made 12 3-pointers in his professional career. and that's just because he hasn't been in those situations. He hasn't had that opportunity, and he's effectively Decker's backup, and he's there for his defense, and his defense is very good. He's active, he's got long arms, he moves his feet, but offensively he's nowhere near the finished product. And then in relation to the guards, it's Solwad again. Mo Solwad has been a pro for 11 years. He's been a pro in primarily Spanish second division, a little bit of ACB when he was younger. Again, not a shooter. Again, a defensive specialist. And Devin Van Oostrum again, who's not, you wouldn't say is a scoring point guard. So that then puts everything onto Luke Nelson, and Luke Nelson has to decide whether he's going to be a point guard or a scoring guard. Well, Luke Nelson's skill set is a scoring guard.
Yeah.
But in that team, because of where all the talent is located, where all the money's been spent, he has to kind of be a facilitator.
Yeah.
And that then mixes him up. So,
I thought they were actually better balanced with Van Oostrum on the court, even taking away the fact that he's not as good a scorer as Nelson. Because, I mean, ultimately, when you get to that level, and I've been covering EuroCup for a number of years, EuroLeague for even longer, it is very point guard focused, because it's all about pick and roll and creating mismatches and taking advantage of the mismatches that you create largely out of pick and roll situation. So you need a point guard that is experienced in that. It doesn't even have to be a scorer, because you see, I call it the Spanish point guard, because every Spanish team seems to have a local guy in his late 20s, early 30s, who averages 4 points a game and 4 assists a game, and you think his numbers are nothing, but actually he's just adept in the pick and roll at creating mismatches and plays defense at the other end. And I suppose Van Oostrum is the closest thing they have to that sort of role.
Certainly in this game, that's right. I mean, in this game, I think he was able to get the ball to people in areas where the other guards really weren't. But that's, as I say, that is not Solwad's skill set. That's not Queeley's skill set. It's not really Nelson's skill set. So in theory, that's what he should be able to do. But then they still have to have people who can make shots. Make shots from outside. And in this game, the Americans for Hapoel were able to make 3 after 3 after 3, and the defense was what I'd call BBL defense. They were kind of there, but there wasn't that much running people off. There was you're playing against a higher level of shot maker. You've got to play a higher level of defense. I don't think they ever did that to the point of getting out to the 3-point line. So it's difficult because the money is in Decker. Decker is the guy, and for him, and Decker is probably the best player on the floor. And, if he plays the whole game, and the whole team and the minutes that everybody else plays are adjusted because of the fact he can't. But the backup depth isn't really there at that highest level with either experience or shooting at the guard spot, and they don't have an American point guard, or they didn't have. They've obviously got Best to come back. He's Canadian, but they didn't have an American point guard, which every other team in this EuroCup will have.
Yeah.
And that's a judgment, the decision they're going to have to, I think, reflect on and maybe give it a couple more games and see where they're.
Because the other thing is, I wasn't quite sure what to expect from Hapoel, because they've not really played much European basketball at all. They've never been in the EuroCup before. It's a historic club. It was Maccabi's old rivals, and then obviously had financial problems at some point and went down to like Division 5 and worked their way back up, and now have got all the way to the EuroCup level. So obviously the crowd has come in, great atmosphere. They're pumped because it's their first EuroCup game as well. They've obviously invested pretty well in the team, although again, not a ton of guys who've played in EuroCup before, but experienced guys. So I think I uprated them after watching them live, and I've got them again next week, so I'll be interested to see how they go with that. But there are worse teams than Hapoel in this group, so I think circumstances really hurt London in that regard. But like you, the issue for me in their ceiling is at the point guard position would be my take.
Yeah, and that's right, and that's all you can take because it's one game out of 18. So you know, it's like that doesn't mean Hapoel's the best team in the world. It doesn't mean London's the worst team in the world. What it does mean is that there is, and as I said, you know, Best, you know, we saw a bit of Best on Saturday, sorry, and he was, you know, pretty effective. So he may give them something else in due course, but they're going to have to make some shots, and you know, if the shot making is going to come down to Decker, who can get his own, but then Hruban and Zubcic, who basically need people to create shots for them. You know, primarily they can get their own, but it's generally off the catch. Then they're going to have to, I think, be more adept at doing that because the margins are so far so narrower, so much narrower, EuroCup as they are in BBL. And yeah, they're going to need to be. They can't be outscored from the 3-point line like they were and win many games.
No, that's true. And again, they're in the better group in terms of finishing in a higher position. I think the bookmakers, when I looked at it, I can't remember exactly, but it was either 5 of the top 6 or 6 of the top 7 by odds were in the other group. So there's some games to come that will be good for them. So Jacovian Brown had 19 points and 6 assists. He did the damage in the early stages in particular. Xavier Mumford had 11. Thomas Janat had 11 and 6. You talked about the 3-pointers. They were 11 of 37. It felt like more than that, I think, because they did the damage early on. Zubcic had 21 and 8. Kufos 14 off 9 shots and 10 rebounds. And the Lions were 4 of 26. And therein is a 21-point difference in 3-point shooting. So let's get to the BBL. Start on Friday night, the Sky Sports game that I was at. Sheffield Sharks 66, Newcastle Eagles 59. No Channel Banks for Sheffield, out injured. Johnson comes in for Newcastle. Mockford was suited up and played a few minutes, but he was obviously injured, and I think it was less than 3 minutes, so he didn't really contribute to the game. 2 of the lowest scoring teams in the league. The 2 lowest scoring teams in the league so far. And it looked like that, 5-6 after 5 minutes.
Yeah, I think Mockford was ill, actually, from what I heard. So, but there you go, he played 3 minutes at the end of the first quarter. Yeah, it wasn't quite Cheshire and Sheffield from the week before, but it wasn't that far off.
No.
You know, in relation to the pace, I think, like Mike took, I was a little bit surprised at Sheffield. I thought Sheffield came out very flat in the game, and possibly coming off that win. They've got that monkey off their back. They've got the win, so that's right. And you know, I think the very first possession of the game was Saeed Nelson dribbling the ball for 23 seconds. You know, it was just like they didn't get into anything. Against that, I thought Newcastle defensively came out quite on point. You got, you know, kind of met Sheffield's defense kind of face to face, and that led to the game being, as you say, you know, a bit of a grind all the way through. And certainly early on, you know, Newcastle really struggled to score outside of Hamlet. Sheffield struggled to score at all until they were able to get some success throwing it down at the post.
Yeah,
and the game was kind of won and lost.
Eagles led 20-25, but then Cook started to really take over as much as anybody did in that game, and it's 30-31 at halftime.
I thought Newcastle missed their shot. Actually, I thought, you know, they had Nelson in foul trouble in the first half. He had 2 fouls. He sat out quite a lot. He came back and he picked up his 3rd foul. And you know, at that point, you know, you really couldn't see Sheffield, you know, scoring the ball, and Sacco was in the game, giving Sheffield a lot of energy, but he has yet to prove he can make a jump shot in the BBL. Not saying he can't, but he's yet to prove it. And I thought that by letting Sheffield basically score from within 6 feet of the basket through Bennett Cook, you know, by basically letting him catch the ball, go to his right, and you know, Defoe was in foul trouble early, and you know, Shelton really struggled to guard him, just couldn't guard him. And Newcastle, I didn't think were necessarily quick enough to kind of throw any double teams. You could have double teamed off Sacco, made a play or two, you know. and they didn't do that, and that allowed kind of Sheffield to remain in a 1-point game at halftime when, you know, from my perspective, it probably should have been 6 or 7 to Newcastle in a low scoring game that buys you a little bit of time in relation to the third quarter. But, you know, Cook was excellent. I mean, to be fair, he caught the basketball. They couldn't guard him, and he got hand ones, and he got. I mean, you know what I said last week about Leicester. You know, you got to be able to defend without fouling. Newcastle couldn't defend, and they were fouling.
Yeah.
You know, that's a pretty devastating combination. And you know, he had more than half the points at half time, and he made 1 jump shot. You know, so that's 14 points from either the foul line or from 3 feet. You know, now that. And to be fair,
the first 3 scores were all 3-point plays.
You know, and to be fair, you know, Bennett Cook probably isn't the first guy on the scouting report in relation to this guy's going to go off on us. You know, 25 is the most he's ever had.
Also against Newcastle, coincidentally.
Also against Newcastle. Here we go. Tiva obviously knows the way to wind him up for those games. But nevertheless, you know, when you look at the lineups that Sheffield had on the floor at times in the second quarter, he was clearly the guy they're going to. And at that point, you know, someone's got to step up and either defend him without fouling, or the team's got to, you know, be a little bit closer to him, get the ball out of his hands, a little bit closer to him, double him on the first dribble. And they didn't. You know, and the thing is, Tiva said it about Cook after the game. He said, look, he's one of the most skilled big men. And he is. There are very few guys in this league who are 6'10", and who can do what he does. In fact, finding 6'10" guys nowadays is very, very difficult, even in the BBL, simply because of the way the markets are and the way that they're so valuable around the world and the amount of countries that pay for them, you know. So he is, but the knock on him has always been, you know, it's either, you know, it's up here 1 game, it's down here 2 games, and, you know, it's foul trouble. It's so, you know, are they going to be able to get any consistency out of him? It's going to be the key. But in this game, he was the difference between the 2 teams.
He was. And then the decisive run came around the final break. Oganyemi with a couple of scores started a 10-0 run by Sheffield, which, bearing in mind at the time it was a 43-41 game, that's adding 25% to the overall total, and they were 53-41 up early in the fourth quarter.
Yeah, I mean, there's 2 things. One, Newcastle scored 10 points in the third quarter, and Hamlet scored 7 of them. You know, everybody knows Hamlet can score by now. So, you know, somebody else is going to have to step up and find a way of scoring the ball for Newcastle, because, you know, that's not going to get it done. They've got some solid pro players there. I know Cohen, I think, Cohen didn't play the last 5 minutes at Plymouth, and subsequently found out that's because he hurt his back. And, you know, I know that, you know, having hurt your back on that floor at Plymouth, a 400-mile ride home doesn't necessarily help it. So I think he was playing through a little bit of pain. But they have to get more from inside. They got more from the inside. They have to get some scoring under the basket, and Defoe was in foul trouble and basically shot a lot of jump shots. Shelton was not particularly effective at all, and the Sheffield big guys combined for 39 points out of 65. And if you don't get easy scores, it's all right us saying, "Oh, wow, that's a great shot by Hamlet. That's a tough play," or he's made a step, he stepped inside somebody, or he's gone off the wrong foot. What a play! All of this stuff. That doesn't matter if you're not going to get cheap ones. You know, the odd ones are great, you know, but if that's a difficulty of shot, then that's a problem. They also obviously they had the American first game back in the league with Johnson, with his fouls and really kind of off the ball fouls, because he's being a bit over physical as far as the refs. So that didn't help them either. But overall, you know, their scoring let them down. The defense was fine. Their scoring let them down. And Sheffield, I just thought as the game went on, commensurately, their offense got a little bit easier. They didn't actually make all the shots, but I thought their offense just got a little bit easier, and a little bit more comfortable, because I thought Newcastle wore down a little bit defensively. And it is wearing when you can't score. To keep having to go back and get back. So having, you know, shot the ball that badly to give up 66 points from Newcastle's perspective isn't bad, but it's no good if you're not in the game. No.
Sheffield 2 of 11 from 3-point range, having been 2 of 8 against Cheshire and 3-point range. And somebody at the end of the game asked me, when was the last time a team won 2 games in a row, making only 2 3-pointers in each of the games, and he asked not to be named, but there's only anybody who watches this show or listens or follows me on Twitter knows there's only one person who would ask such a niche Sheffield related, well, maybe two with his dad.
Come on then.
Yeah. So the answer is, you were there, Dave. The answer is the Eagles won 3 in a row in February 2014, scoring 2 or fewer 3-pointers in each of the games. I haven't written down who they were against.
That's remarkable. Now, that team, that was a team with, we didn't have a lot of shooters on that team because that was the Gauze, Malik Cook, Drew Lasker, Fab. Now, Charles was on that team, but Charles may have been hurt in that time. I might be wrong.
There was, I can't remember whether Charles playing, but I remember I looked back at, I'd filtered out all the Newcastle ones. It looked like maybe a couple other ones might have been there as well a few weeks earlier. But that was the last time, February 2014.
That was a team which, was like that.
Leicester and Sheffield have both, in the intervening time, won twice in a week, scoring 2 or fewer 3-pointers, but both had a game in between, so they weren't consecutively. It's been done 92 times since 2008. And of course, the real answer to this is between 1972 and 1984, all league basketball games were won by fewer than 2 3-pointers because there wasn't a 3-point line. More interesting than that, I thought, was the stat I came up with on Saturday morning, which is Sheffield have won 2 games in a row, scoring a combined 128 points, which has only happened 3 times before in BBL history. Sharks did it in December 21, 62 and 66, same score. Plymouth in November, December 20, 59 and 69. And Doncaster did it in September 1994, 65, 54, which was the famous 54-47 game against Sheffield.
Sheffield, they had that team. Had Paul, that Doncaster team had a guy called Paul Bale and Anthony Joseph, and a few other guys.
Juice Joseph.
Juice Joseph, and that was Brandon's Sheffield team as well, I think.
It
was. That, and then they were. I mean, that was Finch's first year as a player, and those guys were just right in your face. I actually, and just going back to this game, I actually thought, as slugfests go, I thought it was primarily, competitive defense as opposed to horrendous offense. I just thought, I thought this part of the season, I just thought the defenses was a help, and the scouting reports were ahead of the offense. And those teams obviously also played each other in pre-season, so they kind of knew each other a little bit as well. So I didn't think it was, as I said, I didn't think it was quite as ugly as the Cheshire Sheffield game previously. But that's Sheffield's identity at the moment. That's how Sheffield was trying to win. There's no problem with that, coming out and guarding everybody and playing like that. Newcastle haven't quite got to that point of what their identity is at the moment, but I think that they're trending in that direction of basically, we're going to stop you, we're going to get in your face. And that, Johnson's another addition which kind of fits with that mentality. They just got to find someone who can put the ball in the basket a little bit more than the guys are doing at the moment. Obviously, Mockford plays, it helps. Opens a court a little bit.
Eagles now 0-4 for the first time since 1991-92, which was, of course, Sunderland. And it's only the 3rd time it's happened. It was also the first season of the BBL in 87-88. Cook, as we mentioned, tied his career high with 25 points, 9 of 13 shooting, 7 rebounds. The previous one was in December 2019, also against Newcastle. And Nichols had 11. Hamlet, 23 points, 5 assists. Varner, 12 points, but 4 of 12 shooting, 8 rebounds. Kennedy, 11. Eagles, 23 of 62 and 5 of 20. And again, tough to win a game if you can't put the ball in the basket.
Not enough easy. Not enough easy. And to be fair, Cheshire didn't get anything easy against Sheffield the week before either. But still, they have to find a way of getting some cheap points from somewhere.
Let's go to Saturday night, in which everything is a little bit sketchy for me because the stats have still not come back. The scoreboard on the game on the YouTube was questionable. It didn't seem to be following the baskets that went in. So we'll make the best as we can with this. No Kufos, no Decker. for the Lions. Johnson was in for his debut for the Scorchers, and the Lions were either 8-4 or 8-2 up. I wasn't quite sure after 4 or 5 minutes, but then only scored a couple of points in the next 7 minutes. Their offense just, I mean, we've talked so much about all the weapons that they've got, but suddenly they just couldn't throw it in the ocean, really.
Yeah, they have peaks and troughs, but that's generally related to the personnel that they have. Firstly, the game was impacted by an absolute smorgasbord of offensive fouls. An explosion of offensive fouls. And, you know, I went back and I watched each one of them. I think there was 5 called in the first 5 minutes. And I think there was probably 2 which I thought were tough. The other 3 I thought were spot on. 2 that were tough. There was one on Jack Donmy where he kind of rolled off a screen and kind of ran into somebody. And I wasn't sure that was even an attempt to screen. I thought that was kind of a bit of a make-up for the fact that London had been called for a couple. And then Sharma got called for his second foul, which is actually a big call in the game, certainly in the first half of the game, right in front of the Lions bench. And I watched it back and I'm looking at it thinking, I'm not quite sure what he's done wrong there. You know, there is a point whereby a little bit like the 3-second calls you talked about last week, there has to be an advantage-disadvantage situation and an impact on the flow of the game. You know, we can't be watching referees calling, you know 5 offensive fouls in 5 minutes unless they're absolutely all, you know, nailed on offensive fouls. And sometimes it's not the same refs that are calling it, you know, so each ref's getting one of their own in, you know. You know, so it becomes a little bit tricky. But the thing that struck me about the beginning of the game, just that aside, and that was that really impacted London's rhythm because, you know, Sharma was their starting centre and a big guy and was really impactful early. Best was really good. Best came back and played like a guy who hadn't played for a while and he needed to prove a point. I was really impressed with him. He started off the game impactfully, both in the aggressively and in the screen and roll, throwing lobs. And I don't think he's a true point guard, but I think he's enough of a guy who knows how to play to be able to navigate, you know, that kind of stuff in the BBL when you've got a target like Sharma to throw it at. And yeah, it was all, you know, all as you would, you know, with after 5 minutes, because London's starting 5 have done what they're meant to do. You know, I didn't quite finish as well as perhaps they should have. Had rhythm taken away and got a bit irritated by the fact that there's, you know, 3 offensive fouls or 4 offensive fouls being called on them. But, you know, they're basically shutting down Surrey the other end. But London's bench is not London's starting 5. You know, the bottom line is they're not. You know, and the names on the name on the front of the shirt, just because it says London, doesn't elevate the players that are coming off the bench to be able to play in the same way as guys like Ruban and co. And outside of you know, Zubcic, they don't really have a scorer off the bench, and you know, they haven't really been given Ward Hibbert any time to kind of see if he's got that ability. And I just thought that once their bench came in, they looked like the team that didn't really know where it was going to get shots from. And Surrey didn't score remorselessly or relentlessly, but Surrey scored like a BBL team, you know, with the odd shot, you know, you kick it back and Jalen Ray is going to make a 3 and then you throw it to the, you know, to the wing and Wang's going to attack or make a 3. And suddenly it was one of those games whereby London were just a little bit discombobulated. And it took, you know, in fact, all the first half they were discombobulated. The coach has to decide: do I keep Sharma out for the whole first half because he's got 2 fouls? That's a difficult call with that group on. They've got. He's clearly playing them only certain amounts of minutes. You know, he's really conscious about the minutes that they're being played. And I get that. You know, you can't be burning your guys out to make sure you're up by 20 against Surrey at half time, because he's comfortable that he can wear teams down. You know, so we all look at them as being vulnerable because hang on, they're down by 6 to Surrey with like 2 minutes to go in the first half. And everyone's thinking, oh, hang on, something on here. But he's aware that his best advantage is the depth that they have, the length that they have, the defense that they have, and the ability to, even without Decker and Kufos, to kind of maneuver that depth to the 3rd and the 4th quarter of games and flick that switch. Or turn on that bathtap or whichever.
Which is basically what happened. They had 10 points or 11 depending on what you believe. After 12 minutes, they were 9 down, 25-16, but they did manage to finish the first half with 11 of the last 13 points to lead 33-37 at halftime. And Surrey were just about hanging on. I thought Wang was really good. And they were only down 7 with a quarter to play, but as you say, that eventually wears on you, and London pulled away and were pretty comfortable in the end.
Well, yeah, well, a couple of things happened. First, just on the numbers of this, I mean, Quealy is 0 of 8 from 3.9 this season. I'm not on him. I just looked at his numbers this morning. Solowade is, I think, 6 of 22 or 6 of 23. Okay, so that's combined 6 of 31 from that spot. Devon Van Oostrum hasn't shot many at all, but he's not shot. He's not made a particular significant amount. Kaboza is kind of a little bit further back down in the rotation, as is Ward Hibbert. So they're not guys who are going to be in the game early. And ultimately, if you're playing London, you're going to stand there and say, well, if these guys are shooting the ball, that's my best shot. As opposed to, pressurizing them and having them go to throw the ball into Zubcic or Sharma or Huban, or helping off Huban to go and guard one of these guys. So that's an adjustment that they're going to have to make in relation to their lineups. I think I'm not sure that they can. I mean, it helps because he's winning with defense. So you win this game by 20. So how can I turn up, put my hand up and say, oh, they're getting all this wrong? But down the line, in relation to certainly the EuroCup games, and if they have to play multiple BBL games without Decker and Kufos. And without Decker is a massive thing because Decker is a cheat code. Decker he's a cheat code. So when he's not there, it's a little bit harder for everybody else. They're going to do that. Then you may have to look at staggering those lineups a little bit. Maybe starting Solowade as kind of a defense, because that's what they did in the third quarter in Newcastle, and it impressed me. You started Solowade as a defensive-minded guard at the top, and then you bring in somebody else. Come into your second unit, so your second unit's got kind of another threat. But as I say, rich man's problems. Then what happened in the fourth quarter was finally, without Decker and without Kufos, Luke Nelson became Luke Nelson.
And
the reason for that in my mind, this is speculation, it might be entirely wrong, but it's everything I know about the game, is that he's not worrying about having to throw the ball to Decker. He's not worrying about having to throw the ball to Kufos. He's being able to play, because suddenly he looks around, he's like, actually, look, it's me here. I've got the ball here. I can make some plays, And he made a couple of deep threes. He made a couple of step backs going to his left. He got a couple of drives going. And he looked, like an unguardable, BBL player. And that's what they have to unlock. They got to find a way of unlocking that, whether he's playing the 1 or the 2. He is a weapon, which they have to find a way of unlocking. The fact that they haven't had him this year isn't, I don't think, a physical thing. It's a mental thing. It's finding a role, fitting around everybody, being comfortable in what he's being asked to do. But that was him at his most effective. He took that game away from Surrey. From Surrey's perspective, pretty good, I think. I said the same about Newcastle when they beat Newcastle by 15, pretty good. It's only, but
Johnson, good signs from him in the second half.
He looks like a guy. He's not going to miss many dunks. He didn't make many layups in the first half, but he didn't miss many dunks in the second half. And if he's changing his layups for dunks, I think the coach is going to be pretty happy. He did. He looked like a live BBL body. He blocked a couple of shots as well. And he's probably an undersized 5 playing the 4, so whether he can shoot or not is another question, but he's going to be active around the basket and he's going to help them a lot. They're still obviously point guard deficient without Lawrence, and again, I think Wang is talented, but he needs to be left to be what he is, which is a wing, an attacking wing, who can attack, who can shoot a bit, who can get into the lane, who can get out in transition. I'm sure Lloyd doesn't really want to give him too many minutes at the point guard spot, just wears him down and makes it harder. And Luke Bazumburu's he's probably coming into the league as effectively as any NBL 1 player has in the past 5 years. But he's still got a way to go with being a point guard against London, because when you drive against London, You might make one or two, but there's going to be some big guys there.
Yeah.
You know, and so you know the point guard spot is the thing. I think that if they can get Lawrence back, or if they can find a solution with that, and they still have an import spot to spare if they use, and they've got a guy who knows a little bit about basketball helping Lloyd now as well. You know, so you know they're going to be tough, I think. You know, but everyone's going to be tough, I think. And you might find that there's a tough team this year who ends up 8-28.
Yeah.
No, that might be right. You know, who is still thinking, because there's no freebies I can see anywhere.
So as I say, the stats were down on this, so I can't give you any of the.
I saw some of them. I did
again.
see them. I might help you a little bit. So I got a quick look at them. I think on maybe the Saturday night or this morning. I can't remember which. And the thing that struck me was primarily London's minute spread was really kind of unfair. Again, you know, nobody more than 23 or 24 minutes. Unfortunately, the BBL plus minuses had everybody on positive plus minuses. Okay. So I don't think that including Surrey, which I don't think is physically possible or numerically possible. And outside of that, it was Nelson, I think, who led London in scoring. But I didn't really. And Ruban, if I remember, only had 3 points, but he had a very good plus minus again.
So let's move on to the late Saturday night game. Bristol Flyers 91, Leicester Riders 85. No Jackson still for Leicester, and Washington still not moving right. Bristol hitting shots all over the place early on, particularly Bell. He had 11 points in the first 6.5 minutes, and Bristol jumped out to a 21-8 lead.
Yeah, I mean, firstly, Jackson being down really impacts Leicester because they change the starting line if Mackenzie comes in, and that's not like for like, you know. So that's not something which is kind of plug and play. Suddenly, Mackenzie's very different to Jackson in the way that they've played over the past year or 2 years. It also takes a little bit away from Mackenzie's kind of spark plug energy, which is even more important when you realise that Washington is playing but really shouldn't be playing. And from what I can see, that's not the Connor Washington that they need. So that kind of does impact Leicester from the get-go. They don't have anybody who kind of fits Jackson's really good, you know, and they don't have anybody that kind of fits his role. It means that Whelan has to shuttle up a little bit and play a little bit of a different role, and having the two guards changes things as well. But that said, then Bristol are playing, you know, with a unique, I think, roster, I think, in BBL terms. Basically, they've got two basically rookie GB guards in Samuels and Watson Gale. I know Samuels played last year, but basically he's a rookie. Yeah. Two GB qualified centers in Delpesh and Smith, right? And then 5 Americans who are basically, you know, you're still trying to figure out what each of them does differently from the other. You know, they're all interchangeable. They're all between 6'3" and 6'6". They all got noticeable BBL skill sets, and they're all playing without fear. Right? So in this game, it was Bell, who is probably the one who has the least reps as a shooter, who comes out and makes 3 tough left-handed 3-point shots in a row. You've got Delpesh doing what he's done for the past 12 months and being one of the best big guys in the league. And then, you know, you've got to pick either Ollison or King or Mahan. And Miller. But Mahan is shooters who can all make shots. And then Miller, who kind of pulls the strings, and when the shot clock's running down, finds his way to make a ridiculous shot, or alternatively get close enough to the rim whereby somebody else can rebound the miss of the ridiculous shot. You know, and they're playing with such freedom and with, you know, no apparent fear. And that's what struck me. You know, it's like, and then Andreas is rotating them in and out very quickly, so they're only playing 4 or 5 minutes, and then then Samuels and Watson Gale are coming in. You know, and they're getting in people's faces, and then you're trying to work out which of the Americans is on the court. Is that Mahan? Is that Ollison? Who's that? What's King played much? Now I'm trying to keep an eye on all the numbers and who's playing when. And because of that, it's particularly in that building, they you know, they've had probably the best. You know, if you're in the BBL pre-season, you'd quite like to have all your games at home. You know, if you're running a BBL month of the season, you probably wouldn't mind it either, because you've got the team gets into a rhythm, they get into a comfort area. They don't have to do all the stuff that.
Well, the interesting thing about this game is Bristol have now played 22% of their home schedule, and Leicester haven't played a home game yet.
Well, BBL schedules are, as ever, esoteric.
Well, that and the darts has been on.
Yeah, the darts has been on. Okay, but yeah, that's not the word that Flanoy once used to me about it, but I said about it. Yeah. So it's slightly weird, but you know, you've got to take advantage of your advantages.
Exactly.
It's not a question, you know, it doesn't matter. Nobody cares. It makes a bit of grist for the mill of this particular podcast, but in reality, you know, they're playing the games have to be played. Everyone has to play each other 4 times this year, so you're going to be getting your long trips on the road at some point. Back to you. So Leicester, a little bit out of sync. You know, Thornton is only playing the second game for them. You know, he's probably a score first guy at the moment, you would say, and that doesn't necessarily help them at the beginning of games when it's always been about getting everybody else moving. You know, he's not going to be there yet. He's clearly mega talented from a scoring perspective, certainly from anything 15 feet in and getting to the rim and getting out in transition. But, you know, you can't just plug a guy in there and say, oh, you're going to be the same. Everything's going to run exactly as it did before. It's not going to happen. And Bristol are that kind of team whereby everybody's up in your face and jumping around and boo-hooing and high-fiving, all that stuff. So they did start slowly. But, you know, the one thing about Leicester is that they are incredibly consistent, not in relation to their wins and losses, but just in what they do over the course of the game. You know, they are, they're not boring, but they are repetitive. You know, in the way that they get there, they get good shots, in the way that they stick, in the way that they don't foul defensively, the way they retain their composure, and they know that the game is eventually going to come back to them. You know, that's always been the thing about them. You know, you just don't see them getting blown out. And you know, when Bristol's bench came in early, and they struggled to maintain that kind of energy and shot making, basically, and that allowed Leicester to gradually impose themselves a little bit in transition. Whelan got going a little bit, and by the beginning of the middle of the second quarter, suddenly it was a close game again. And
so Loving hit a 3, and it was an 11-1 run that Leicester had to make it 41-39 with 3:30 to go to halftime. But Watson Gale pushed it back out to 7 at halftime. Leicester then the first 6 points of the third quarter, and then Whelan with 5 quick points, and Leicester had their first lead of the game in the third quarter, 53-54.
Now I've just remembered I've entirely missed the most important part of the game.
Which was?
Well, you know, I don't regard myself as a fashion guru, but I am slightly concerned that 3 weeks after pointing out that we have a new referee with a fantastic silver moustache.
Yeah.
Now that moustache is gone, and
It
it's
has gone.
I've never spoken to. You know, I wasn't. It wasn't.
It was one of them where I was like, "Is that the same ref?" No, it can't be, because he hasn't got the moustache. I do. Yeah.
No. Look. I truly apologize if there's been some form of referee kind of WhatsApp ridiculing going on, which has resulted in it being removed and hitherto never seen again. I actually was a fan. Obviously, we've got Andy Thackeray, who's been a ref for like 25 years. He's had the silver moustache for years. Maybe it was a bit of competition going on between them. Only one moustache in Bristol every week or something. But anyway,
November is only round the corner. We've got a chance for it to come back.
We'll see. Well, it's going to be slow. It's going to start with stubble, though, isn't it? You know, I'm not sure if that's half and half works. And, you know, be committed to it. Anyway, sorry, moving on. The game, you know, Bristol are peaks and troughs, obviously, because of the way they play, and they play fearlessly, but they don't run that much stuff in relation to sets, etc. They're very NBA orientated. They're kind of quite happy to run a little dribble handoff at the top and let whichever one of their guys go one-on-one at the top and create, because they believe in kind of the talent that they've got on the group, which is fine. It just means that there's very little dead time in their offenses. From the moment the offense starts, it's flow, they're attacking. So they're in attack mode. That can result in peaks and troughs. And they had a couple of troughs whereby, but they were relentless at Leicester. And that was the problem. Leicester never quite got to grips with their offense. Now, I thought Leicester ran some really pretty stuff in relation to their offense. I thought they rather picked Bristol apart at times, particularly in the second half with Whelan, Curling and Nelson Henry and then Walker. I mean, Walker had 16 points in 40 minutes in this game. It looked unguardable, And I thought it was one of those games whereby, Leicester was were getting progressively easier shots as the game went on. But 3-3-2s and in Bristol, particularly this with Watson Gale, who he's fearless. He averaged 19 a game in a Division 2 college in the senior season. Jelani Watson Gale, which basically tells you that he's a scorer, and he's been a guy who's had the ball in his hands with the game on the line at a good level of basketball, right? And this is the downside. This is the argument that you get from people. Well, why do we send Brits over to Division 2 colleges? Why aren't they playing Division 1? Why aren't they playing NBA? Why aren't they staying in university here? Well, you're never going to get as much experience as he's got in 100 plus competitive games with the ball in his hands, averaging 20 a game at the end of the game. So whilst he's a rookie who's had a hell of a lot of repetitions, and he knows his game. And I don't think he's going to come off every night, because his game is quite individualistic. And he has the kind of the step back three going left and the attacking the rim and confidence. He made one little pivot move in the paint, which was like, ooh, whatever. But he kind of drove them on when some of the Americans were getting into foul trouble, because they're not particularly disciplined defensively. They foul quite a lot. Mahan fouls, Ollison fouls, that type of stuff. And I thought his offense and kind of key point, his ability to make a shot and not to be fearful of shooting the ball, kept them going, because Walker and Nelson Henry were getting layups, and apart from Mahan making a couple of threes in succession.
So we'll just get to that bit. Mahan made back-to-back threes that got him out to 68-62. Then a McKenzie three and a couple of layups from Walker ties the game at 73. And then Watson Gale with 3.5 minutes to go, big shot, put his team back in the lead, 82 to 80. Come the other way, Thornton had one go in and out, come back out. Miller then drives the other way, and it's a 4-point game. Thornton had one come out again off the elbow, and off an offensive rebound, Miller again scores, and it's 86-80.
Yeah, I thought when it got down to that kind of 4 minutes to go in the game, again, Leicester suffered a little bit with Thornton being new. It's probably a good thing for them going forward in the long term that he stepped up to try and make some plays, and the plays that he tried to make weren't necessarily the wrong play. But he's yet to convince as a shooter outside of 15 feet. I think we could say he's over 5 from the 3-point line this season, and he looks like a guy who wants to get kind of at best to a pull-up shot 15 feet from the basket. And also Bristol are very good now at kind of condensing the lane in relation to ball handlers, because they're long and athletic. And I think there was 2 shots he had which rimmed out, which were certainly one of them I think was inadvisable. And then the third time, I think he drove in and got blocked into the rim.
Got blocked, yeah.
And those 3 possessions were probably, it'll be good for Leicester for their repetition that he's been through it. But I think we'll be looking.
If you go back to, I don't know if it's exactly the last 2 trips that Leicester have had to Bristol, but the 2 that I can think of where they pulled out a game late on, it was Zach Jackson scoring 10 points in a row in one game and Gino picking them apart in the other one.
Exactly, neither of them playing. And so, as I say, you don't criticize, I don't ever criticize the guy for trying to take it over, because it's his job, and he's doing the right thing. But it's still a little bit early for everybody else, for everyone knowing what's going on, have the confidence in each other. Loving what interested me in this game, because he did a very funny thing with a foul shot in the first half.
Where he went,
missed the foul shot and then went and dunked the ball. And and I'm trained, unfortunately, and it's probably a curse to read into players' body language far more than I ever should, because I've had 10 years of being told how important it was when I was on the bench. It just struck me as being a bit strange. And there's a couple of times he looked a bit wistful, a bit, which and you kind of pick this up at Bristol because the camera works so good. You get right close to the guy's face. So maybe that's all the time. But there was a couple of games he just kind of, whatever. And, and it's that kind of, the biggest battle for Leicester, I think, as I said before, it's not going to be themselves. They're still really good. The biggest battle is going to be the trudge through the season. And fighting and climbing the hills that they've already climbed before for the guys who've already done it before. Because Bristol don't have any worry about that. Bristol basically got Miller and Delpesh and a bunch of guys who really are loving every minute of the BBL because I think it's great. So it's that freshness for them, So there was that, and
so the next bit you're talking about loving. He made a 3 to make it 86-83 with 1:10 to go. And then Bell scored with 47 seconds to go. And you and I have had this chat via message back and forth because what happens is Bell lays it in. Leicester then go to inbound the ball. Mahan, I think it was, stole the ball and laid it back in. And then there was a big hoo-ha about whether Leicester had requested a substitution or not. So you and I have both looked this back, because your first thing to me was the table have bottled that basically, and they shouldn't have wiped off that score because Mackenzie hadn't asked for a substitution. He gets up. Rob says, Rob tells Kimball to sub in. Rob is watching the game. Right. So at this point, but Kimball kind of gets up, walks over towards, gets stopped, takes his shirt off. Takes his shirt off. Then he gets put to one side by Matt's Pitkin and starts talking to him. And so obviously Rob and probably Pablo as well, he's sub in. So basically, and the rule is the game should stop, and that's 2 minutes because you clarified with us. If you call a sub, last 2 minutes, the team who doesn't score is allowed to make a substitution on the other team's score.
That's right. And so the question was, did he formally request a sub or not? And I think Kimball got lucky. I'll be honest. I think I understand. I think he did. I don't think he asked for a sub.
No,
he didn't sit down on the bench.
It's one of them where you can just see him. It doesn't look like. So the ruling on substitution, by the way, is that only the player can ask for it. The coach and the assistant coach can't ask for it. It has to be the player, and they ask for it clearly by making the symbol, the X symbol that we all know, and sitting on the chair. Right. That rule is, and I say this as somebody who has spent approximately 32 years sitting on the table.
Not overly popular.
Very next to usually right next to the subs bench at one end or the other. That is almost never followed to the letter.
I mean,
and what you find with table officials is they see that, particularly, it's not an issue at Bristol because the table's not very long, but in some places the table's quite long and they can't always see. So the table officials, particularly in the last couple of minutes of a game, have their head on a swivel and are always looking for that. Now, Mackenzie would be fortunate enough that he would be in the eye line of whoever's job it is to make the substitution thing. So they will have seen him. And my take of table officials up and down the country is 95% of them will give that sub even without the proper protocol being called for.
I don't have a problem with the signal. I don't have a problem with the signal. The only issue is I could not discern him saying sub to the team.
No. I think you're right. I think you're right.
And if he didn't say sub to the table, then he got lucky.
Then he got lucky. But the reason the basket can't count, by the way, is because number one, if the basket is scored, it is not a correctable error. And if there is a correctable error, anything that happens in between the error and the correction cannot be taken off, fouls or points. So if there's a mistake in some way, shape or form, and the ball goes into the basket, that basket has to count. It can't be taken off. But if you watch it back, and nowadays the clocks are linked in, the clocks on the screen are linked into the clocks in the arena. The clock stops at 47 seconds when the original score from Mahan goes in. It does not restart. And therefore the basket can't count because the clock isn't ticking. So therefore the play hasn't gone. So my gut feeling from seeing that bit of evidence is somebody didn't blow the horn, but the timekeeper thought there was a substitution being made and therefore didn't start the clock. And if the clock hasn't started, you can't count the basket.
And this was the point amongst our messages in the court of Mr. Justice Forrester, whereby you won on the balance of probabilities. Right, I'm not going to give you a beyond reasonable doubt verdict. So on a
if the clock doesn't start, the basket can't count.
Yeah, I get that, but on the balance of probabilities in relation to who screwed up.
Yeah.
You know, because if as you say, the clock doesn't start because it stopped when the basket is scored.
Yeah.
So when the ball is put back in, it should be started again.
Yes.
Right? The clock hasn't restarted, then there has to be a reason why it hasn't restarted.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to believe that that's because just at the moment, at that moment in time, the timekeeper forgot. That's not that's not plausible, right? No. Therefore, it must have been because the timekeeper knew something.
Yeah.
And therefore, as you say, if the clock doesn't start, the whole thing is moot anyway.
Yeah.
But I say, just say sub, you know,
Yeah.
say sub, you know, just say sub, because then none of that happens. And
the whole thing is moot anyway, because nothing happened.
It extends this podcast 10 minutes.
Yeah. It made no, I suppose the one difference it could make, and I'm legally bound to say basket difference might matter if these two teams finish level at the end of the season and that 2 points, but if the clock doesn't tick, you can't give a basket. So Watson Gale, 18 points in 28 minutes. Bell had 17, most of that in the first quarter. Miller had 12 and 8. Thornton led Leicester 16 points, although 7 of 17 shooting. We talked about the 3 at the end that didn't go in. Whelan, a far more efficient 15, 3 of 7 from 3-point range. Walker with 16 points in 14 minutes off the bench, you mentioned. The interesting thing about Bristol, because a lot of people have been talking about Bristol, it's got a lot of social media traffic as to are they legit, I think is the word, or are they for real? And of course, we all like to wind up the Drew Lasker by saying he picked them last, and he's quick to go. So did Achara. My thing about Bristol, right? They shot 45% field goal percentage in this game. Coming into this game, and I've not done the totals post this game, but coming into this game, they were last in the league in field goal shooting percentage at 38, which, bearing in mind that they've played all their home games, is a little bit concerning. And then the other thing that people respond back was, yeah, but they're a great offensive rebounding team, and they do lead the league in offensive rebounds, but they average 0.5 points per offensive rebound, which is the second worst in the league. So they get a lot of them, but they're just not turning them into only 9 second chance points. My thing with them is, based on their shooting numbers and their offensive rebound conversion rate, I think their record is better than those numbers would have you believe. And therefore, if they continue like that, there is some regression to the mean on the record. But what I will say is, if they shoot above 45% from the floor this season, they'll finish in the top 4.
Oh, absolutely. Well, I think finishing in the top 4 is, when you start 4-0, then you can't say that's unlikely. I'm contractually obliged to say it's early.
Yeah. All of this is small sample size, but 38% is still. I mean, to be 4-0, shooting 38% is pretty good.
Yeah, and shooting doesn't generally travel, so that's one of the things that doesn't travel. But they are aggressive defensively, you know. And now how they'll handle the refs on the road and how they'll handle the whole thing about being on the road is potentially a bunch of new guys, who knows? And none of this is to take a swipe at them, in any way.
No.
But unfortunately, it'd be a pretty boring podcast if
exactly,
we talk about what's already happened instead of try and put our necks on the line.
But I will put my neck on the line and say Lasker is wrong. They're not going to finish last.
I think, well, to be honest, and they're kind of, it's weird. They're a weird team because they're put together unlike any BBL team I've ever seen. They're playing in a direct attacking way, which is really fun to watch. Really fun to watch because there is, it's not hard. It's all about guarding them. It's all about guarding their individual tendencies because they're not running a tremendous amount of stuff to get the ball to a certain guy in a certain spot. It's it's very kind of, I watched a lot of the Raptors last year. It's very Raptors, like, getting the ball to someone at the top of the key and letting your best player go one-on-one. Not as much screening going on as there is probably for the other teams in the league. Not as much system, but I like it because they're winning and the guys are playing confident as a result. Well, they're shooting travel. Who knows? Who cares at the moment? Let's see. That's why they play the games. But you can't have done. They've beat what? They beat
some good teams. They beat Manchester and Leicester.
Beat Leicester.
They obviously had the derby against Plymouth as well, which comes with different levels of emotion.
Yeah, absolutely. So you only do what's in front of you. So so good for them. And we'll see. But we don't know enough. The reason that we're all speculating is we don't know enough about these players. There's two of them coming back. So we don't know. We don't know at the moment whether Thomas Bell is going to make 3 threes a game, if he's going to be like Taj Green. We don't know if Ollison and Mahan are going to keep shooting the ball the way they are, or if Watson Gale is going to have any rookie regression. We just don't know. And it's fun kind of find out. For Leicester, they need Jackson back. They need, because that just puts all the square pegs in square holes. I was a little bit surprised Walker only played 14 minutes. Nelson Henry was impactful as well, and he had a little bit of foul trouble, Walker, but not foul trouble which really limited in 14 minutes. And that only one of them is going to play. But in that game, he's outperforming Nelson Henry this year on a per minute basis, on an impactful basis. And he's looking like he did 5 years ago, to be honest, when he came into the league. And he's playing less minutes and being more impactful. So I don't imagine Rob will change them around in the starting lineup, but it'll be interesting to see if if you run a rotation whereby Nelson Henry starts and finishes the half, then, and that foul trouble apart, for instance, and Walker plays the middle minutes, and that's generally going to be about 12-8 to Nelson Henry.
Yeah.
Which is going to end up being 24-16. And and I think Walker's earned a few more minutes than that, just because he's just so impactful on the court. He just looks really, really good. And Connor, Connor is just integral to what they do, and so he needs to be healthy. And to be honest, if he's not healthy,
defensively, you would probably say Jackson and Washington are the two best on-ball defenders.
Yeah, here's the thing. Again, it's not the name of the shirt. It doesn't make you a better player, right? So the minutes that Washington and Jackson are playing, Bowman and Walsh are playing. Had to take some of them. Bowman showed a little bit offensively, particularly off the bounce, but defensively, him and Walsh are nowhere near Washington and Jackson at this point. And they took Bowman off the dribble a couple of times, and Walsh got 3 fouls in 3 minutes. Yeah. They're not. You can't expect them to be. They haven't played at that level for as long as they have, and that impacts just little moments in the game, which takes away from kind of the relentless machine that they've been, which means that you can't quite maybe put your foot down the way that you want to. So instead of being 6 up after playing well, you're actually tied. And that keeps you in games. So. Yeah, health as ever in the BBL is critical.
Integral. Bristol off to their best ever start, 4-0. They've never won their first 4 games in a BBL season before. Let's come to today. Cheshire Phoenix 78, Caledonia Gladiators 61. Obviously, speaking of Bristol, a former Bristol player back in the league, Evans coming in for Strawberry at Cheshire, and he goes straight into the starting lineup. Bailey had a couple of early fouls for the Gladiators. They were 8-0 down after 4.5 minutes when Gareth called a timeout. It didn't get any better. They were 2 of 11 shooting, 3 turnovers, 25-4 down after 7 minutes. They were still on the bus, weren't they, Caledonia?
Yeah. Well, 2 things. Firstly, Evans is an interesting pickup. Now, it's amazing how sometimes the stars align, in basketball. It's certainly in the kind of the level that we're talking about here, because Evans actually got signed in Sweden this year. And he got signed for a good Team Luleå, who are currently 4-0 in Sweden. And he played, I think he may have come off the bench in most of the games, but he hasn't made a shot for them. He was shooting like 23%. He was, and averaging 6 points a game, and clearly hadn't fitted in for whatever reason. Now, the Swedish league is roughly comparable to our league. I saw, obviously, in pre-season. No Copping's their best team, and Leicester beat them, and Newcastle beat them. And the players who play kind of bounce around from one league to the other are relatively similar in in stature. So it's not like Evans is being played out of Sweden because he's not good enough. So things just haven't figured from there. But that means he gets released, and he gets released at just the time that Cheshire clearly need an upgrade in their point guard spot. How do we know that? Well, they scored 49 points last week.
Yeah.
So it doesn't take a basketball sage. It's not. I'm not being Hubie Brown by saying that an upgrade was probably necessary. And so, bang, here's this guy who averaged 16 a game and was third in the league in steals last year. Thank you very much. Do you want? He's been released by the Swedish team. He's in Europe. Do you want to pop across here, Marcus, and play? Perfect fit, perfect signing. Gives them a ball hawking duo in the backcourt with him and Austin, and that's stars aligning, because if Marcus Evans makes is shooting 55% in Sweden, he's not playing in Cheshire.
No.
You just don't know sometimes these things happen, and the best kind of things that happen to basketball teams aren't done by planning or great logical progression. Nelson, Henry, and Crowdell came after the beginning of a season. Just because someone else couldn't come, or someone else got hurt, or someone else wasn't good enough. So that lineup helped them. Glasgow, Caledonia, wow, okay. What to say at the beginning of the game? Well, obviously, two things that come to mind. One, they played a friendly down there before the season started, in Glasgow. I think they were Glasgow at the time. They destroyed them. They beat them by 25, and that stays in players' heads. Sloan had everything he wanted in that game. And I'm not sure that they were ready for a slightly different Cheshire team in a game that mattered. Secondly, Cheshire had adjusted because Jamel was guarding Sloan, point guard. And thirdly, they came out the most passive way imaginable.
Yeah, it was really passive.
It was jump shot after jump shot. Defensively, they were loud scores at the rim. They got into a little bit of foul trouble, and until Onwas and Tape came in, it was getting really, really ugly, and it was their passivity that struck me. There was just nothing there. There was no aggression either way. Even the fouls they were picking up were kind of cheap ones. Everything was a kind of a jump shot. There was no offensive rebounding. They weren't working the ball inside the Fraser. As you say, you say stuck on the bus. I would just say not ready to play.
Yeah.
And that kind of happens with young teams. And, we've talked about, that starting lineup is basically 3 rookies, Fraser, Malcolm, and Ali Fraser. And the 3 rookies are the ones who've got the ball in their hands the most.
Yeah.
They're the ones who are going to dictate, And I didn't think they were ready. And Cheshire were good, but they're starting 5. But the noticeable thing about this game was that Ben's really shortened his rotation significantly. Daniels played 15 minutes. Neighbour was the only big guy off the bench, and Evans played 2 minutes. So he basically played 7 players in this game, this rotation. And they're starting 5 with the 2 guards, who are kind of both combos, Austin and Evans. It means that they have tended to kind of stagnate when Austin's been dribbling the ball too much at the point. He needs to be in goal mode. So moving him off the point a little bit helps them. And then the 2 guards, and then Jamel shooting the ball well on the wing, and Teague and Ocharobia inside. And Teague's kind of a litmus test for them, a little bit like Bradley was last year. If he's scoring the ball, particularly from inside, then they become a tougher team. So that 5 is quite a well-balanced 5. It's got defense, it's got a bit of scoring. It's got a bit of size, it's got a bit of muscle with Mike Ocharobia. Off the bench, not quite so much, because Evans is struggling at the moment because he hasn't basically showed he can make a shot. That's a problem. He needs to. His defense has been fine, but offensively,
Danny Evans as opposed to Marcus.
Yeah, sorry, Danny Evans, my fault. And Daniel's the same. Daniel's has kind of been a bit wishy-washy, a bit hit-y-missy. So there has been a drop-off from there, and that kind of whereas Glasgow's bench with Onwas and Tape, they actually showed a little bit of gumption. That's probably the best word I can use, and it's not a word that many American basketball players would necessarily understand or figure out. But they had something about them, Onwas was attacking the rim and taking the challenge a little bit, and then they brought good old Father Time in, Johnny Bunyan, oldest 30-year-old in Scotland.
Let's get to that. So end of the first quarter, Anderson had 10, Ocherobia had 8, the Gladiators had 6. 27-6 was the score. Johnny Bunyan gets a ref assist. You don't see that very often. Nice little chest pass from the ref. Johnny Bunyan picks it up and scores.
There's some muscles there demonstrated by Tom Williman, because it was kind of it wasn't even it was kind of a chest off, It's like one of those kind of footballing moves whereby it just hits him, but it doesn't just hit him and drop, it hits him and bounces 3 feet off. Hell of a pass. That kind of summarized Glasgow's Caledonia's day up until that point. That was almost a twist, the moment that
it turned. So they're 20 points up with 7 minutes to go, 33-13 in the second quarter. Gladiators scored the next 15 points in a row just as the power went out on the stream. Onwas had a 3, Malcolm had a 3, Tape had 6, and by the time the lights came back up on the old YouTube, it was 33-28 with 1:40 to go to halftime.
Yeah, we've got a better page now, which says, there's been a power out. I mean, Ellesmere Port in darkness. How can we cope?
Well, I think it must have just, because they were still playing, so it must just have been the stream. Somebody unplugged the stream by the extension cable, probably.
Yeah.
So into the second half, and Onwas and Fraser both hit threes. They had another 15-3 run this time, and they're in the lead, 51-54 with 1 and 40 seconds to go in the third quarter. And this is the one when a team's been up 20 and then find themselves behind, where you sort of go, what's the mentality of them here? Have they got a reaction in them?
Yeah, I mean, I thought, but Caledonia got hit by their foul trouble.
Foul trouble, yeah.
Basically, Bailey fouled out. Onwas subsequently fouled out as well, and Onwas was probably the guy. He's interesting because he doesn't have a kind of an immediate go-to skill that you see, but if he's knocking down threes and he's attacking the rim and getting his shoulder to the rim in a kind of a straight line way, takes charges, rebounding, he's going to be a pretty useful kind of glue guy for them. And I wonder if at some point he'll end up starting ahead of Malcolm, because he's kind of a 3-stroke 4. You're not sure quite precisely what he is, but he's shown some potential. I thought he dragged them back into this game, and then they made some shots. But
Cheshire got on a run just before they fouled out. Neighbour ended up with some size mismatches where he had Sloan on him, was able to score some effort plays from Marcus Evans. One, I think, was a steal in transition. One was an offensive rebound and put back, and it was 65-56. That was the point at which Onwas fouled out with 5 minutes to go. And then a minute later, Bailey fouls out on a technical to make it 66-56. And actually they ended up with 17 unanswered points, Cheshire, to go to from 53-56 down late third quarter to 70-56.
I didn't watch that. I watched that technical back. I didn't really like it, but I don't know what was said. That's the only thing. Didn't really like it because the ball was on the sideline. No one's watching anybody. And Bailey does have a word for the ref, and he kind of makes a movement with his arm. But when the ref signaled to Gareth what it was, I think he seemed to be suggesting that he moved his arm to either. I thought initially it was he's throwing the ball away, but it wasn't that. He seemed to be suggesting that he'd moved his arm and towards him. Now, if it was given because he said something unacceptable, that's fine. Albeit I didn't see an immediate kind of what did you just say kind of reaction. If it was given for this kind of nonsense visual dissent rubbish that they talk about at times, I'm not a fan. because the ball, it's one thing visually dissenting a ref when you're standing in a referee's face, or you've just missed a call and you run down the court and you're slating them like that. When everyone's looking at the sideline because 3 guys have dived out of bounds, no one's interested, no one's cared. So there's no, you're not showing anybody up, So just an offhand maneuver I didn't particularly like. And it was, what got me was kind of Bailey's reaction to it was like, what? He was really genuine. It did appear to be genuinely surprised. Now, I'm fully aware that players have almost incomparable levels of capability for deception, in relation to their own culpability. So I don't believe me, I'm not taking that entirely as overwhelming evidence in support of the defence. But I thought, to foul someone out on that basis was a little bit tough. Subject, as I say, to what he said. But Glasgow, Caledonia. Sorry, I nearly swore. Caledonia, their issue, they were slowing down, right? And Sloan is their guy off the dribble. And if their wings aren't going to make shots, not Adams, Bailey, and Bailey never got into any rhythm, 2 quick fouls, didn't play much in the first half. And Fraser isn't going to score the ball. And it's difficult to see where their offense comes from if teams can take control, take care of Sloan. Mm-hmm. And Glasgow and Cheshire took care of Sloan with Jamel. The only couple of times he was able to kind of get loose was when Neighbour was in the game and he missed a couple of pick and roll coverages and got to the rim on him. But without that kind of injection from Sloan, it was, their offense basically dried up and they looked a bit tired by the end. And, in the first half, it was Tapé who kind of helped bring them back into it. And then obviously the mysterious missed points thanks to the power outage. And in the second half, it was no one. When they got to the fourth quarter, they, once Sloan, if you think of the game that Sloan played against London, where the first 2 possessions, they're in drop coverage, and he pulls up 2 times, drains 2 threes, then he gets the foul, then he drains 1. The next time the guy comes up high, the pick and roll guy, the center comes up higher, he goes past him to the rim, makes a layup. Right? None of that happened today. They defended them in an entirely different, a far, far better way. And that's what makes differences over a season. Teams have to defend, have to figure out how to defend guys. And you're going to play them so many times that then the question then comes, who adjusts next?
Yeah.
Cheshire adjusted to him because of the preseason game. Next time they play, how is he going to adjust back? It's kind of the same with Thornton and Bristol, because with Bristol were going over the screens for Thornton, and Thornton was getting kind of downhill to the rim, and I'm thinking, why just go under and see if he can make a shot first, before you let him do what he's really good at. And so the adjustments that come will be kind of really important as the league goes on. But that, to me, was a key adjustment in that game. And Cheshire, Evans got going. Evans made a few shots, and Evans is a shot maker. He's going to get his shot. They might not all go in. He might not shoot them at a great clip, but he's going to get his shot. And when he made a couple of plays near the end, that takes a bit of pressure off Austin. And Teague's being impactful and ended up with 17 points, which is big for him.
Yeah. So Anderson had 19, Evans 14. I had Teague down as, Evans 18. I had Teague down as 14, but
I thought
I might have got
you might be right.
44-34, the rebounding in favour of Cheshire. Onwas had 14. Tapé 10 points and 9 rebounds, both those two coming off the bench. Adams had 10. They were 24 of 63 field goals. I don't normally look at the league table until there's 6 games on, but some people have played 6, so we'll run through it. London top 5-0, Bristol 4-0, Manchester in third 4-1, and then so there's only 3 teams above 500 so far this season. Cheshire are at 500, 3-3. Sheffield are 2-4. Caledonia, Leicester, and Plymouth all 1-2. I don't think any of them have played a home game yet. They've all been, obviously Plymouth and Caledonia played cup home games, but in the league. Surrey 0-3 and Newcastle 0-4. London at the top. Presumably they're going to stay there now.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's going to be interesting to see how other teams approach them. It's going to be interesting how they handle having to play teams multiple times. All this is interesting, but interesting is obviously the pundit's word for. I don't really know, but let's watch out. Anyway, it doesn't really add much. It doesn't elucidate much. I appreciate, but it's going to be interesting how they play teams.
It's also that thing of they didn't play with Decker and Kufos. Obviously, Decker injured. Kufos, I'm assuming they're just managing his minutes. He's one of the more experienced players on their team, and prioritizing what he can do on Tuesday and Wednesday nights. And I guess we saw that they had 20 minutes of struggle offensively as a result of that, maybe even 30 minutes. And if a team more wholly formed than Surrey are at the moment, can take advantage of that.
Yeah, but I'm I get that, but I don't think they should lose a BBL game that Decker plays in. I'll be blunt. If Decker is healthy and plays in the game, they shouldn't lose a BBL game. It doesn't mean they won't. But with everything else they have around him, with kind of the extra that they have with him, they shouldn't. But what I'm kind of more intrigued in is not the kind of the physical, the shot making, the matchups, the other teams getting better side of things, because nobody is going to be as good as him, no matter how much teams improve their rosters or whatever. But the psychological side of it, the psychological side of both ways. So the psychological side of the London guys having to turn up and play the same team again that they've already beaten twice, heavily.
Yeah, by 20,
And it's not a question of not coming in as a pro and not coming in to do your job. It's a question of the degree of irritation you get that you've got to do it again, right? The degree of kind of, and then what filters into that is the attitudes that the other teams take. Because what I expect is that as the season goes on, there will be less subjugating themselves, if I put it that way. There'll be less bowing down. Not that there is any anyway. As teams get to know each other and get to know, I expect there'll be more in the way of talk. I think it'll get a bit more elbowy. That's a bad phrase, but I don't mean in an aggressive way. But I think there'll be more of an edge to the games. Every time the team plays, I think there'll be more of an edge, and I think people will get into these teams, into London's face a little bit more. And I think they'll need to be and challenge them mentally. Now, there'll be some games that doesn't happen. Some games teams go down to London and know they're going to get beat by 30 and get beat by 30, right? But there will be other times, when you're coming up against, Fletcher and Dirk and Manchester, or when you're going down to Bristol and you've got all these guys playing like that. And we've seen it at Surrey and Newcastle, who are probably, at this point in time, the two least formed teams in the league, or least ready teams in the league. We've seen that both those teams got into London. No, I say it. I mean, they made them know that they were here, and say, "Oh, we're here." And I just think that's going to be the way that teams take them on, and how players who are aiming at bigger things handle that. And on the London side, how they handle that challenge, the professionalism that they have, that I think will be the indicator of just how well they do. Because it's not easy.
No, it isn't.
Psychologically, it is not easy to just keep doing. These guys are not machines. You just don't walk on the court. You're not 20 points up when you win a game. When you start a game, sorry. They're not machines. They have to get their bodies ready. They have to do it, and they have to do it Tuesday, Friday, Sunday, Tuesday, Friday, Tuesday, Sunday, Tuesday. And they're going to be, and all the time they're going to be hearing it from the outside if they're not winning a European games.
Yeah.
So then
we all go, they're going to cruise it, aren't they? Which brings its own sort of added pressure. They're in a no-win situation because if they win by 20, we all go, yeah, we thought they were going to win by 20.
But it's their internal dynamics. The only thing that can beat them is their own internal dynamics. Now, at the moment, they've showed us nothing which would suggest there's going to be any problem at all with their internal dynamics.
Not at all.
Or very little. I mean, there's a couple of kind of looks between Zubcic and Soko in one of the games, but that was about it. And and that stays the same, that's fine. But if they're 0-4 in EuroCup and then they have to go to Bristol, and the guys in the EuroCup, suddenly the fingers are being pointed in relation to why we're not winning EuroCup. The organization's considering roster changes, and the mentality of the group is shaken a little bit.
Yeah.
Then the time they're vulnerable is when they have to go and play those BBL games.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean vulnerable. Doesn't mean, and I think we're aware now that they're not 40 points better than anybody. At the moment, they're about 20 points better than everybody with the full group. That's the way it looks like. And if they play well and pay proper attention, maybe a little bit more, but they've not blown anybody away from the beginning, apart actually probably from Leicester, but then Leicester, they weren't able to put them away.
No.
Everybody else has played them straight up in the first half, and it's just the depth that's gone out.
My sense of some of that is the fact that it was Leicester meant they started bang on it.
Right, I'm sure that's right, and that's the interesting thing, you see, because after 30, eventually of 36 games, if you keep turning up and being 10 points down halfway through the second quarter on the road, eventually one of your players is going to blow a gasket, doesn't get thrown out of a game, and eventually somebody might be injured, and you're in a real dogfight, and that's why it's virtually impossible to see them going undefeated.
Yeah.
But that's still.
I haven't looked at their schedule. Looking at that group, I don't think they'll be 0-4. But I don't know the next three teams. I know they play Trento on this week at home, but I don't know the two games beyond that. But I don't think they'll be 0-4.
They do need to win. I mean, they do need to win some. They need to win, not just because we want to see them winning, because we do, but they need to win for their own internal dynamics. Winning covers a multitude of problems. It hides a multitude of problems.
Yeah.
And those are problems that you only see glimpses of out on the court. But if they continue to win, I'm sure they're fine.
Yeah.
If the EuroCup means that they struggle, maybe not. Everybody else, as I say, it's the same cop out. It's early.
Yeah.
Some teams aren't fully formed. It's amazing. I mean, everybody needs to understand that this is massively different this year. Probably, and you'll tell us. Probably, it's a long time since we had a 36-game league season. I can't remember one when I was.
Yeah, it is.
Maybe 2009.
36 in the basis of it's a long time since teams have played each other 4 times.
Yeah, exactly.
There would be 36 because they were playing each other 3 times.
That was a 13-team league, so that might have been 12 years ago, 13 years ago.
Yeah.
We had that. I think it might have been the year that my first year, I think we won the league and lost in the playoffs to Mersey, to Everton. But 36 league games is massively different to 28 league games or 30 league games. It sounds a lot, but it is massively different, because playing each other 4 times means that, generally you're looking to win your season series. And if you beat everybody, if you're 3-1 against everybody, you're 27-9, and you shake hands and you say that's a hell of a season. But you also have the situation whereby you're not going to end up with one of those quirks of the schedule whereby, you might only play, you might have to travel to, in our world, it was, we have to travel to Plymouth, Bristol and Surrey twice, and Leicester twice in the season. Yeah. And then once at home, and therefore you can't get back some of those games. Everybody's on an absolute fair, on the same path now. So there's a lot more time. We also have the cups and the cups and the trophies, which are basically single leg. So they really are ancillary competitions until you get to the final nowadays. So I think you can see some of the teams at this point. Certainly we've seen it with Surrey adding, Newcastle changing, Cheshire changing. I think you might see a couple more make a couple of changes as well, simply because the season is so long that it's not really all about the very next game at this point in time. It's about getting into the dog days of January and making sure you've got enough. And just so people understand, generally BBL contracts will have a clause in which allows a no-fault release for players, generally within about 45 days or 8 games of playing their contract, of signing their contract. So basically, a club can turn around and say, "No, we're going to release you," and a player could turn around and say, "Well, I want to be away." So teams are generally up against the gun in relation to making changes. They have to make them within a certain period of time, otherwise they become liable for the entirety of the cost of the contract. So when you see teams making changes at this point, That's not because they're not willing to give it time. It's because of the contractual situation in relation to the players and the costs of the club, etc. Mean that they have to make somewhat at times fast forwarded decisions. When you'd actually like to, when the coach might actually say, well, I quite like to see this play out for another 3 or 4 games, I think we might be right. But then you may see another guy comes on the market and you think, well, we've got to take him.
Yeah. So
it all becomes, and that's the thing. And obviously there are a couple of clubs with spaces. Leicester have space for another American if they want one. I mean, that might depend on Jackson's injury at the moment, but they're only at 4 Americans. Surrey are even with they're at 4 Americans as well. So there's at least 2 spots there. There may be somebody else as well. I can't think. So the kind of the way that you manipulate and rejig your roster at this point of the season is also quite important, because you have to be looking at February, and we'll see. We'll see where it gets to.
We will indeed, and we will call it an evening for this week. We still managed to do, I don't know, an hour and 20 or something on 5 games, one of which we missed the key run, and another one we've got no stats from. But there you go. That's what the gift that keeps giving, aren't we?
The way I work it is that, you see, I know we've got a lot of people who listen to this rubbish during their morning workouts.
Yeah.
Like that, so you see, the way I think
give Rowe a few more reps. That's what it
exactly.
is.
Run, fat boy, run. That type of thing. Just keep running. I'm not going to shut up until you finish.
Yeah.
So if anybody wants to drop an order as to precisely how long they're doing, what kind of cycle they're doing,
hook us up with your personal trainer, and we'll
maybe they're working up from 6 miles an hour to a 7 mile an hour.
Yeah.
Then we'll try and do it to order.
We're available on social media if you want to do that. But for now, have a great week, everybody. We'll be back next Sunday night to do it all over again. Goodbye.